As the saying goes, the best camera is the one that you have on you. And if that's the case, then why don't more photographers talk about the incredible camera that you almost always have in your pocket? In today's video, I'm going to walk you through the photo settings that I use on my iPhone that make my wife ask me, why do your photos always look better than mine when we have the exact same iPhone? Let's get into it. Let's take this over to the desk so you can get a run through of all my settings that I use. One thing to keep in mind though is that I'm using an iPhone 14 Pro Max, and this is on the iOS 18.3.2 version. So it's up to date as of today's recording and upload. But if you have an iPhone 16 Pro, Pro Max, any of the newer iPhones, your settings might be slightly different. So I'm going to mention a few that you're not going to see here, but you'll see on your side if you have one of the newer phones. We're going to go ahead and open up the settings on your phone and then go into camera. As I mentioned, if you have one of the iPhone 16 Pros or Pro Maxes, the first setting that you're going to see in camera is camera control. And this is the button on the side of your phone where you can tell it exactly what to do when you press it. Personal preference here is whether or not you want to have it as a single or a double click, but my recommendation would be to have this open the camera anytime you do that action. The next setting for the newer phones is photographic styles. Now, for me, being on the iPhone 14, this is down at the bottom, so I'm going to run through this in just a minute. All right, let's dive into record video, where I shoot 4K 24 FPS. This is what I shoot on my mirrorless, so I always want to keep that the same as what I'm shooting on my iPhone. All right, now let's scroll down. Show PAL formats is off, enhanced stabilization is on, action mode lower light is off, HDR video is off. I don't really like the look of HDR video. Auto FPS is off, lock camera is off, and lock white balance is on because I don't want to be adjusting my auto white balance throughout the entire time that I'm shooting. Let's go back here now. Record Slo-mo is 1080p at 120 FPS. Next is record cinematic, and I keep this at 4K 24 FPS because that's what I shoot in for everything else. I keep my record sound set to mono, and allow audio playback is always on. All right, let's dive into formats because this is what's really important for image quality. First, I keep this at most compatible because this is going to give you a JPEG or an H.264, whether it's photo or video, and this is really important for post-processing. Next up, we're going to go into photo capture, and this is one of those instances where if you have an iPhone 16 Pro or Pro Max, you're going to have a few different settings. So the first one that you're not going to see on my screen, but you would see on your phone, is photo mode. This I would recommend you set to 24 megapixels and not 12 megapixels. Next, in photo capture, I'm going to have my ProRAW and resolution controls set to on, and then Pro Default will go in there, and I'm going to select ProRAW Max up to 48 megapixels. One thing to keep in mind with the ProRAW images is that Apple is always going to do some sort of post-processing to them, whether you like it or not. The best way around this is to take your ProRAW images and upload them into Lightroom Mobile or Lightroom on your desktop and do your own editing to them. By putting them into Lightroom, this will strip Apple's post-processing, and you can add whatever editing and processing you would like to do so you can fully control what your images look like. Let me know in the comments down below if you'd like to see a video on editing on Lightroom Mobile and how to set up a mobile preset so you can quickly edit your photos on the go without really having to put too much thought into it. Now for those newer iPhone 16s, you're going to have another setting here within photo capture, and that's ProRAW format. I would suggest you set this at JPEG XL lossy because this is going to give you compression on your images so they're not massive and taking up a ton of space on your iPhone, but still you're going to get really high quality out of those images. Next up, we're going to take a look at video capture and make sure that Apple ProRes is on. And once again, we have another iPhone 16 specific setting here, and this is where you're going to want your ProRes format set to log. This is going to give you much more capabilities when you try to go to edit your videos later because you're recording in a flat profile, so you can then put LUTs and color grade your footage. Next, we're going to go into preserve settings, but one of these is for iPhone 16 and its photographic styles. For me personally, I would turn this off because I don't want my iPhone putting any stylistic adjustments onto my images. I'll speed run the rest here with camera mode off, controls menu off, creative controls on, depth control off, macro control on, exposure adjustment on, night mode on, portrait zoom on, action mode off, ProRAW and resolution control on, Apple ProRes on, and live photo on. Next, we'll take a look at the rest of the settings where we have use volume up for burst is on, scan QR codes is on, and show detected text as off because I quite frankly just don't use my phone for this. Next, we'll look at composition, where I have the grid and the level both on. These are great for ensuring that you can compose your image properly, so you can help to use the rule of thirds with grids on your image, or you have a level so you can ensure that your picture is actually straight in the camera. Next up, I have mirror front camera set to off. This is essentially where you go to take a selfie and you take the picture and you see that the text on your shirt or on your hat is flipped backwards because it's as if you're looking in a mirror, where I have it set to where it's not going to do that. So anytime I take a selfie or an image, any text that is shown on screen will be shown the correct way because that's as if somebody else is looking at you. Now, it looks a little strange for when you're looking at yourself because you're going to look flipped because that's not how you see yourself. But Apple does a great thing where they will show you a mirrored version, so to you look completely normal. But once the image is taken, it flips it, so the final image will all look normal as if somebody else were to be looking at you. And lastly, view outside the frame I have off because I just don't see a use for this. Okay, looking down to photo capture, here's another iPhone 16 setting, which is Fusion Camera. I would set all three of these, so your 24mm, your 28mm, and your 35mm camera. I'd turn them on, and then I would use the default as the 24mm camera. They're all just great options to have, but you may just want to default to the 24 because that's ultimately is what's going to get you the highest quality images. Next up, this is where I mentioned the photographic styles. Now, Apple has a few different with rich contrast, vibrant, warm, cool. I always set this to standard because ultimately I don't want my phone dictating what creative choices I put in my photos. I always want to be able to take these photos into Lightroom or whatever post-processing program I'm using and actually adjust all of these settings myself and just use the standard version of whatever the photographic style is, so it's as basic as possible. Next up here, we're going to turn prioritize faster shooting off because I ultimately always want the highest quality image, and then I'll have lens correction on and macro control on. All right, now that we've run through all the basic camera settings, let's dive into Apple's native camera app and see how else we can adjust our images in here. In the app, we'll have up in the top left this button to control the flash, and next to it, this will control night mode. Now, these interact with each other. If you have night mode enabled and turn flash on, it will then turn night mode off, and vice versa. So you can play around with these and see how they work with each other. Next is your exposure compensation. If you press this, you'll be able to change everything down at the bottom and scroll through to -2 to +2 stops for exposure compensation. Next up, you'll be able to set your image format where you can switch between your RAW max and your live photo. You can't do both, so you have to choose if you want a live photo or if you want your RAW max, because your RAW max is going to get you your highest quality, but your live photo is a lot of fun, and often a lot of people like to use this to capture their dog or their kids to really have great memories within their photos because it takes about a 3 or 4 second clip and you can long press it to see a video. It's really a great feature that Apple does, and I use both, so I'm toggling between the two of them all the time. Next, you can see how the grid actually shows up in your camera's layout. This is one of the settings that we had enabled, so it now shows up within your native camera app. You can also see that there's like a white and yellow crosshair in the middle of the screen, and this is the top-down level, and you can see once they're lined up, your phone is perfectly straight and looking down. Down towards the bottom, you can select between all of your different lenses. For my phone, there's 0.5, 1, 2, and 3. For an iPhone 16 or the newer versions, that 3 is actually a 5, so you can get a little bit more of a telephoto look to some of your images. Next, you can press the arrow all the way at the top, and it'll pull up some additional settings down at the bottom. You'll see that the first few are actually the settings that you have up top. It's just more easily accessible. Next, you can select your aspect ratio to 4:3 or square or 16:9. You can find exposure compensation, a self-timer, and additional visual effects that you can apply to your photos, but personally, I don't use them. One useful trick is that you don't always have to press that arrow up at the top. You can just swipe on the screen and those settings will show up, and then swipe down and they'll disappear. One useful trick is that if you long press on your image format, you can switch between the 3 different formats available to you. So you can do RAW Max or JPEG or the RAW 12 megapixel. Same goes for video. All the way in that top, you can switch between your image quality between 4K and 1080p or HD, and you can change your frame rate. So your 24, 30, or 60 frames per second. It's all easily accessible and swappable up in that top right corner. Next up, one of the great things about the 1x lens in the native camera app is that you have macro ability. So if you press this macro button that shows up as you get close to a subject, you can get super, super close to your subject and get great macro shots. It's great if you don't have an actual macro lens for your mirrorless camera, but you still need to be able to get those super, super close-up shots. You can pull out your iPhone and do this. This is a great example of my nifty 50 lens that you can see the detail on this is fantastic, and I can use this for really any sort of macro application. My dog's right here at my feet, and I'm gonna take an image with the macro lens, and you can see just how close up you can get on the macro lens, and you still have really, really high quality detail. It's worth checking out if you've never used it, and it's great to use in a pinch if you need that really, really close up image. Now that we've run through all the best camera settings, I want to give you a few tips and tricks to utilize as you're actually using Apple's native camera app. And the first tip is to use the rear cameras when you're going to film yourself. Now, it's so easy to just pull your phone up and shoot like this as you're taking a selfie, but if you really want to get the highest quality possible, you're better off turning the camera around and using the rear lens, because that's going to be the highest quality and you're going to get the most pristine images of yourself when you're actually using it like this. My next tip would be to use the 1x lens whenever possible. The 1x, or on the new cameras, it's the 24mm lens, is going to be the most high quality picture that you can get because it's the lens that will get you the 48 megapixel images when you're shooting in ProRAW, because all the other lenses are only 12 megapixels. So if you really want the highest quality images possible, stick to that 1x. And if you're zooming, don't do the scroll zoom like you can do with your thumb. Switch between each of the focal lengths and only stick to those focal lengths, because when you're scroll zooming, it's actually a digital zoom and you're losing a ton of quality within your image when you're using those. And the last thing to keep in mind when you're shooting on your phone is that lighting is still so important. The more light you have, the better your subject will be lit and the higher quality your image is going to be. It's the exact same concept as if you were using a mirrorless camera, just the camera on your phone. And that's going to do it for today's video, all about iPhone photography settings. Hopefully you found this video helpful, and thanks so much for sticking around all the way until the end. Make sure you leave a like on the video, put a comment down below so the algorithm can help grow the channel, and as always, make sure you subscribe. Until next time, go out and use your camera.